The pianist can't play. Then, what will happen to the hotel? The biggest event in the hotel's history, drawing VIPs from around the world and capturing media attention. This performance was, in fact, the make or break plan to revive the hotel, which had been struggling with financial losses for years. If it succeeded, sponsors would invest, and the hotel could escape the threat of closure. A packed venue, moments away from the performance. And yet, suddenly, the main pianist complained of severe pain in his arm. The entire hotel sank into despair. What are we supposed to do? Our future depends on this performance. Desperate voices filled the air, and tears rolled down the face of the woman in charge. It's all over. Everyone began to believe that, until that moment. I'll play. I, just a backstage worker, quietly stepped forward. What? You're just a crew member. What are you even talking about? The side of the stage filled with sneers and confusion. But that single step became the catalyst for awakening a legendary talent that no one knew about. Could the fingers I had long sealed away be the key to saving this hotel from the brink of collapse? As I played the piano, the entire hall fell silent in astonishment. Who the hell is that guy? My name is Nathan. Here at the historic luxury hotel La Classica, I work as an operations staff member. My main duties include carrying guests' luggage, setting up banquet halls, checking room amenities, and handling minor troubleshooting, supporting various hotel departments. I may not be in the spotlight, but I take great pride in my work. After all, for a grand building and top-tier service to be recognized, someone needs to solve problems behind the scenes. Unlike the front desk or concierge staff, I'm rarely seen by guests. Still, I've decided to take pride in being one of the unseen forces that keep the hotel running smoothly. Because this hotel has elegance, a sense of history, and serves as a cultural hub where many people gather. The lavish interior and impeccable service always makes me think, this place is amazing. At La Classica, large-scale recitals and artistic events are regularly held, attracting musicians and celebrities alike. Just being a part of the backstage crew in such a place gives me a sense of fulfillment. However, among my fellow operations staff, there's one guy who always tries to act superior. His name is Tom. He joined the hotel 2 years before me, and for that reason alone, he constantly enforces a ridiculous hierarchy. During our morning meetings, he openly ignores my opinions and only brags about his own achievements. Yet, in reality, he's clearly slacking off, compared to everyone else. This morning was no different. While I was changing the water in a vase in the lobby, he approached me from behind. You're still as slow as ever. Ha! I turned around to see Tom standing there with his hands in his pockets, exuding his usual arrogance. How many times do I have to tell you? Don't move without reporting to your senior. He said the same thing just yesterday. But if I had to report every little task, I'd never get anything done. Besides, going to his desk would only give him another excuse to pick on me. And that vase placement is off. If you have no sense of style, just leave it to me. Despite never having changed the water himself, he always had something to say. As he walked past me, he deliberately bumped into my shoulder. I lost my balance, and my cleaning supplies fell to the floor. Oops, my bad. But hey, lower-ranked staff need this kind of training, right? He smirked and laughed through his nose. As I picked up the fallen items, he stood above me, looking down in satisfaction. For the past 2 years, I've endured his unfair treatment. The other staff must have noticed, but no one spoke up. They didn't want to get involved. Oh, by the way, you're in charge of the deep cleaning this weekend. I've got something else going on, so I'm counting on you. That was clearly supposed to be Tom's assigned task. But whenever there was an unpleasant job, he always dumped it on me. If I refused, he'd start lecturing me, saying you should know your place as a junior staff member. I had no choice but to nod silently. Yeah, it's good to be obedient. But I guess guys like you, stuck in this position forever, are necessary for the hotel, huh? With a smug grin, Tom walked away. Watching his back, I clenched my fists without thinking. I swallowed my urge to argue back and returned to work in silence. I shouldn't let it get to me, but hearing something like that first thing in the morning definitely didn't put me in a good mood. Lately, though, Tom had been acting strangely enthusiastic. The reason? A woman named Lily, the hotel's arts coordinator. Lily was part of the hotel's cultural affairs department, an expert in planning and managing recitals and concerts. From recruiting artists to negotiating with sponsors and handling publicity, she took care of everything. She was polished in appearance, always dressed sharply in a suit, yet carried a gentle aura. Apparently, Tom had fallen for her at first sight. At every opportunity, he would say things like, "Let me help you," or "You can count on me." Desperate to impress her. But she always responded with a polite smile, "Thank you, but I'm fine." Since Lily was highly competent to begin with, she didn't rely too much on others. Even though she was surely aware of Tom's excessive attempts to impress her, she never directly called him out on it. Still, Tom refused to give up, persistently repeating, "How about now? Need any help?" But it was clear that his efforts were only backfiring. Then one day, preparations for the upcoming recital in the Grand Hall became overwhelmingly busy. As usual, I was quietly handling backstage work when a sound technician approached me with a troubled expression. There was an issue with the speaker setup, the sound balance was off. Tom had also offered to help, but it seemed he wasn't making any progress, and they were stuck. "Nathan, sorry to bother you, but do you know anyone who understands audio adjustments?" I hesitated for a moment. Then, memories of studying acoustics years ago resurfaced. Drawing from that knowledge, I worked with the staff to test different speaker placements and adjust decibels. I pulled the right equipment from the storage shelves and experimented. Gradually, the sound balance began to improve. "Nathan, how the hell do you even know this stuff?" Tom interjected. I ignored him and kept working. Focusing solely on the task, I finally got the sound perfectly adjusted. When the technician and Lily checked the results, they seemed satisfied. "Wow, Nathan. It's flawless, like a pro did it." Lily's eyes widened in amazement. Beside her, Tom bit his lip, looking frustrated. Later that day, as we were finishing up, Lily called out to me. It was around evening, just as everyone was wrapping up. I just wanted to say thank you for today. If you don't mind, could you spare a little time? I was thinking of treating you to dinner as a thank you." I froze for a moment. Even though she was the coordinator, she wasn't my boss, and we didn't have a direct working relationship. I never expected to be invited to dinner. But her eyes were filled with genuine gratitude, and she looked sincere. "Of course, I don't mind. But really, there's no need for a thank you. I just did what I could. No need to be so modest. Come on, let's go." For the first time in my life, I found myself sitting across from Lily not as a backstage staff member, but as an individual. Dining with her at a restaurant on the hotel premises felt surreal. She sat down with a warm smile. She had a much softer aura than her usual dignified presence, and every time I caught a glimpse of her, my heart pounded loudly. I was so restless that I couldn't even focus on the meal, sitting up straight for no reason, gripping my chopsticks too tightly. I didn't even know where to look, and my face felt unbearably hot. "Hey, no need to be so nervous," she chuckled. But that radiant smile only made me even more flustered. Your job seems really demanding. Do you ever get time to relax like this?" I forced myself to say something, but my throat was dry. And my voice came out uneven. "Well, it's been hectic lately, but once days like today, where urgent preparations are needed, are over, I do get some breathing room." "What about you, Nathan? Being an operations staff member must be tough. What made you choose this job?" Caught off guard by her sudden question, I found myself at a loss for words. I hadn't expected her to ask something like that, and I hesitated, unsure how to answer. Her clear, earnest eyes locked onto mine, making it impossible to give some shallow response. I started, but before I could continue, she suddenly changed her expression. Oh, I'm sorry. That was a bit intrusive, wasn't it? I'm not an interviewer, I shouldn't be prying like that. No, not at all. I just don't feel confident that I can explain it well. I see. Everyone has things they find hard to talk about or haven't fully figured out yet. She lightly touched her glass, then, after a small pause, continued hesitantly. Actually, I once dreamed of becoming a musician. I wanted to go to a music conservatory. But my parents told me to choose a path with a future. So I ended up on this career path instead. At first, I thought I had to give up on music completely, but I figured that if I couldn't be a performer, maybe I could support them instead. That's why I joined this hotel's cultural affairs department. Her expression clouded slightly. But once I got here, I realized how difficult it was. The gap between my ideals and reality keeps catching me off guard. I have to balance the needs of musicians while also considering the hotel's business interests. Sometimes, I wonder if this job is too much for me. She dropped her gaze to the table. To be honest, there's talk of cutting back on the hotel's concert program due to the economy. With sponsorships declining, this recital might be the last before they cancel regular performances altogether. Music isn't a profitable industry. And in times of financial hardship, cultural programs are the first to be sacrificed. I'm constantly trying to stretch a limited budget, and honestly, sometimes I wonder if what I'm doing even has any meaning. Hearing her spill her thoughts, I responded honestly. Lily, your work might actually be even more important than the performers themselves. What? Because you're the one who understands both the musician's passion and the audience's expectations, and you bring them together. Without that bridge, even the most amazing music wouldn't reach people. No matter how times change, that role will always be necessary. After thinking for a moment, I added, and besides, because people like you exist, musicians can focus on performing without worry. The fact that you're not a player yourself is exactly why you can do what you do. And I think you do it better than anyone. I'll remember those words. She smiled and took a sip of her wine. The hesitation in her eyes disappeared, replaced with a newfound determination. I want to make this recital a huge success, something that will add a new chapter to this hotel's history. If we can do that, then maybe, just maybe. Her voice carried a sense of conviction. With her, I felt like something could truly change. That feeling quietly grew within me. Thank you, Nathan. I'm really glad we talked tonight. As we stepped outside, the night breeze gently brushed against my cheeks. The lights from the hotel windows looked like a melody of notes lined up in the dark. I had no way of knowing what was about to unfold. But something inside me had shifted that night. Days passed, yet the conversation I had with Lily that evening stayed warm in my mind. During the usual rush of work, flashes of that night would resurface, her serious gaze, her gentle smile. Then, a major announcement sent ripples throughout La Classica. I heard Jake is going to perform at this recital. Hearing my coworker's excited voice, I froze mid-task. Jake, a young prodigy pianist who once made a name for himself not just in Japan, but on the global stage. Despite his youth, his delicate yet bold playing style made him an instant sensation. He performed at international festivals, collaborated with renowned orchestras. He was the rising star of his generation. However, a few years ago, he suddenly canceled his concert tour and disappeared from the public eye. Since then, rumors of a comeback concert had surfaced multiple times, but none ever came to fruition, leaving fans restless as he remained absent from the stage. And now, this legendary pianist had chosen this hotel's recital as his first comeback performance. Moreover, according to reports, if this recital turned out to be a huge success, the hotel would likely continue hosting regular concerts. Lily's persistent offers and unwavering passion had finally paid off in a big way. Sponsors were coming on board one after another, and major media outlets were sending film crews to cover the event. Opportunities that drew this much attention didn't come around often. Even as a backstage staff member, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. Tom, too, seemed oddly giddy after hearing the news. Usually, Tom would grumble about not wanting to do grunt work, but this time, he eagerly declared, "I'll be the one to welcome Jake," with an almost comically overzealous enthusiasm. It was obvious he was trying to impress Lily, but he seemed completely off the mark. Honestly, it just came across as fangirling. Regardless, the entire hotel was buzzing with excitement over Jake's appearance, and Lily was busier than ever. During the day, she was swamped with phone calls and emails. At night, she had meetings with sponsors. In between all of that, she still managed to direct us operations staff on stage setup. Wanting to support her as much as I could, I carried out my usual duties while also stepping in to assist with sound and lighting adjustments when needed. One afternoon, while I was working on the grand hall setup again, Lily approached me with a new request. It seems that Jake's team reached out, saying, "We'd like to check the performance environment earlier." They wanted to check the acoustics, the piano's condition, and even get a full grasp of the stage layout. "Nathan, would you be able to help with the hall's reverberation adjustments? You were a huge help with the sound setup last time, and I'd really appreciate it." The knowledge I had gained that day while working with the sound team might come in handy again. Seeing her confident smile, I immediately responded, "Of course, I'd be happy to." The fire in her eyes from that night was still burning strong. She was determined to make this a success, to ensure the hotel's cultural programs wouldn't be cut. And being able to witness the drive up close made me feel proud in my own way. Actually, she continued, if this recital goes well, the hotel executives are considering continuing the series. The sponsors are saying, if it's Jake's comeback concert, it's worth investing in. So in a way, the future of our concert program hinges on this performance's success. Her eyes held nothing but determination. I nodded but couldn't deny the weight of the pressure settling on me. Still, that only strengthened my resolve. I wanted to do everything I could. No one forced me to do this. I simply wanted to give my all to this job, because it was my own decision. And then, the day finally arrived. Jake himself was coming to the hotel. Tom was in charge of picking Jake up from the airport and bringing him to the hotel. He had been unusually eager about it, but when he returned, his expression was noticeably sour. When I asked him what happened, he sighed, explaining that there was barely any conversation during the ride. Apparently, he had tried too hard to be accommodating, only to end up annoying Jake instead. What the hell is with that guy? He wouldn't even make eye contact when I greeted him. I guess geniuses really are on a different level. Tom's bitter remark aside, I had already heard that Jake wasn't an easy person to deal with. Maybe it was the difficulty of handling fame at such a young age. Or perhaps it was the sensitivity that came with being a true genius. On top of that, whatever had caused him to disappear from the stage for so long was likely tied to something complex. Either way, that afternoon, I was set to attend the meeting in the grand hall alongside the others. On stage, a newly prepared grand piano sat under the spotlight, with the lighting and sound crew standing by. When Jake walked in through the entrance, his tall, slender figure was clad in a monochrome shirt and jacket. His sharp gaze swept across the hall, exuding an undeniable aura. I understand. I'll contact the hotel's executives and get their decision. In the meantime, let's schedule another meeting to discuss the arrangements. When Lily gave him a slight bow and greeted him, he barely glanced at her and muttered, "Yeah." She maintained her usual poised smile, handing him the schedule and production plans, but he only skimmed through them with little interest. "So, about this performance," he started, "since this is my comeback, I want to go bigger." I'm thinking of extending the performance time into 2 acts. Also, I'd like to bring in a small orchestra. You can modify the stage setup for that. Right? An orchestra? Lily hesitated. But the current stage plan was designed for a chamber ensemble. And we've already made arrangements with the sponsors. Before she could finish, Jake continued as if he hadn't heard her. This hall is spacious enough, and the acoustics aren't bad. Besides, I want this stage to be grand. The whole world is watching. If I'm making a comeback, I refuse to do it half-heartedly. Lily prefaced her response with, "Of course, I think that's a wonderful idea, but..." before carefully explaining the budget constraints and scheduling challenges. Bringing in an orchestra would significantly increase costs, require additional rehearsal time, and complicate scheduling. Right now, they were already cutting it close, making major changes wouldn't be easy. As I listened to their discussion, something else started nagging at me. It wasn't just about the stage space, this hall's acoustics had been designed with solo piano and small ensembles in mind. If we suddenly brought in an orchestra, the sound might become overwhelming, throwing off the balance. Depending on where the audience sat, the music could turn from a beautiful harmony into an unmanageable wall of noise. Jake, if you're planning to bring in an orchestra, we'll need to make major adjustments to the acoustics. Specifically, the absorption materials backstage and the angles of the reflective panels would have to be recalibrated, which would take a considerable amount of time. Before I realized it, I had spoken up without thinking. Sure, I was just a backstage staff member, but I was also someone who knew the hall's actual usage and acoustic concerns firsthand. Even though I kept my past as a musician a secret, my intuition about sound was something I couldn't just turn off. At that moment, Jake's sharp gaze pierced right through me. "Who are you?" His expression was practically a glare. Lily started to explain, "This is Nathan, our operations staff. He's helped us with sound adjustments before." But Jake cut her off. "Sound adjustments? That's what the specialists are for. Operations staff are basically just errand boys, aren't they? Why is someone like that trying to tell me what to do?" His blatant dismissal irritated me. But lashing out wouldn't help the situation. I swallowed my frustration and carefully chose my words. "You're right, of course. But as someone who maintains this hall regularly, I simply wanted to point out some concerns. If you're bringing in an orchestra, you'll need adequate time to prepare." "I don't care about your preparation time," Jake interrupted coldly. "I've performed all over the world. I'm not going to limit myself to some local standards. If you can't build the stage the way I envision it, then there's no point in doing this." His tone was sharp, unwavering. Lily opened her mouth to protest. There's no need to be so, but Jake wasn't interested in hearing it. "This is my condition. If you really can't agree to it, I'll just choose a different hall. I could talk to the sponsors and have this deal canceled in an instant. Are you sure you're okay with that?" His words were laced with pressure, and his stare drilled into Lily. She gasped slightly, momentarily at a loss for words. I could see it in her eyes, the fear that the opportunity she had worked so hard for was slipping away. "I understand. I'll contact the hotel's executives and get their decision. In the meantime, let's schedule another meeting to discuss the arrangements. The sooner, the better. Unlike you all, I don't have time to waste." With that, Jake turned on his heel and strode out of the hall. Tom hurried after him, his footsteps echoing behind, while the sound crew slowly dispersed, looking confused and uneasy. That left just Lily and me in the empty hall, with only the grand piano sitting quietly on stage. "Nathan." "I'm sorry," Lily murmured, still standing frozen in place. "You did nothing wrong, but speaking up only seems to have made things worse." Her voice was strained with guilt as she bit her lip. Seeing her like that made my chest tighten. "No, I should be the one apologizing," I said. "I probably spoke out of turn." But honestly, bringing in a full orchestra at this stage is a huge risk. And maybe he's acting that way because he's under a lot of pressure too. Maybe. Just having Jake return is already massive news. The hotel won't want to lose this opportunity, so they'll probably try to meet his demands. But Lily hesitated. In her eyes, I saw not just the pressure of handling a major artist's expectations but also her personal frustration. She was a producer who wanted to create the best performance environment for musicians. At the same time, she had to balance the hotel's interests, the sponsors' demands, and all the logistical challenges. And on top of that, her own deep connection to music made this even more personal. "I don't even know what the right answer is anymore," she admitted. "I want to create the perfect space for music. But that requires money, time, and manpower. And this industry doesn't allow for half-hearted efforts." Hearing her speak with such uncertainty, she reminded me of a violin playing a sorrowful, aching melody. I quietly stepped closer to her and spoke just one simple sentence. "No matter what happens, I'll support you. Just follow the path you believe in, Lily." She lowered her head slightly and let out a small, tired laugh. "Thank you. Just hearing you say that somehow makes me feel a little less lost." The hotel will probably lean toward accepting Jake's terms. But if there's anything I can do to adjust things on my end, I'll do everything I can. Don't worry. This will be a great concert. I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. Yeah. For a brief moment, I thought I saw her eyes glisten. But she quickly straightened up, regaining her usual composed expression. A determined fire had returned to her gaze. "Starting tomorrow, I'll be meeting with the sponsors repeatedly. I need to find a way to balance their expectations with Jake's requests. Nathan, if anything comes up, will you help me?" "Of course. No matter how small, I'll do whatever I can." As I said those words, I clenched my fists slightly. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them alongside Lily and the people working at this hotel. This recital at La Classica felt like a new beginning, not just for the hotel, but for me too. On the morning of the recital, La Classica was filled with an electric atmosphere. Staff bustled through the hallways and backrooms, their faces a mixture of nerves and excitement. This was the moment everything had been leading up to. This was Jake's long-awaited comeback concert, the return of a pianist who had achieved legendary status. On top of that, this performance featured an orchestra and a more elaborate two-act structure, raising audience expectations even higher. As the opening time approached, elegantly dressed guests flooded into the entrance hall. Men arrived in tuxedos and dark suits, while women adorned themselves in glamorous dresses or traditional Japanese attire. Among them, I spotted high-ranking executives from major corporations, as well as journalists and TV crews preparing for coverage. There were surely seasoned classical music enthusiasts in the audience, but many were likely here simply for the hype surrounding Jake's return. And then, at last, the first act of the recital began. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated the center of the stage. As the orchestra completed their tuning, the conductor raised his baton, signaling the start of the overture. It was a grand and powerful classical masterpiece, instantly drawing the audience into its world of deep, resonant sound. Then, as Jake strode onto the stage, the hall erupted into thunderous applause. Dressed in a sleek black tuxedo, he carried the undeniable presence of a true star. Exchanging a brief glance with the conductor, he took his seat at the piano and exhaled deeply. And then it began. His playing was alive, brimming with both strength and delicate finesse. Masterfully manipulating the hall's acoustics, his left hand delivered deep, rich chords while his right hand wove fluid, mesmerizing melodies. The sheer intensity and brilliance of his performance held the audience spellbound. Even from the stage wings, I felt a chill run down my spine. As the first act concluded, the hall once again burst into enthusiastic applause and cheers, marking the intermission. In the audience, some guests made their way to the lobby for a break, others chatted among themselves, and many passionately exchanged thoughts on the performance they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, I continued moving between the backstage and dressing rooms, making sure everything was running smoothly. Then, near the corridor leading to the dressing room, I overheard frantic voices from the staff. "What do we do? If this keeps up, the second act won't." Sensing something was wrong, I quickly made my way toward them. When I opened the door, I found Jake's manager, the orchestra's concertmaster, and Lily all standing with grave expressions. At the center of it all, Jake sat in a chair, breathing heavily, his right arm wrapped in ice. "Jake, how's your arm?" I asked cautiously. His manager answered in his place. He mentioned feeling some discomfort during rehearsal, but the pain seems to have worsened during the first act. If he pushes any further, the damage could be irreversible. No way. Lily's face turned pale as she shook her head in disbelief. The concertmaster spoke quietly but firmly. If he forces himself to continue, it could cost him his career as a pianist. Of course, we've all been eagerly awaiting Jake's return, and we want this recital to succeed. But if we push forward recklessly, it could be disastrous. But the audience is already waiting. Calling it off now would be. Lily bit her lip in frustration. Beside her, Jake's manager clutched his head, insisting that getting medical attention immediately was the top priority. Canceling the recital would be a huge setback, but losing his ability to play entirely would be far worse. This calls for a difficult decision. The concertmaster's words weighed heavily in the room, and the manager reluctantly nodded. At this rate, the second act would have to be cancelled. They could possibly restructure the program and have the orchestra play on their own, but either way, Jake's comeback concert would be a complete disaster. Sponsors, hotel executives, and the media would be in an uproar. More than anything, thinking about the disappointed audience and Lily's unwavering efforts made my chest tighten. Is this really the end? Lily's voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The thought of everything coming to an abrupt halt filled me with a crushing sense of helplessness. We had spent so much time preparing, everybody had worked together to build this moment. And yet, in the face of cold reality, failure seemed inevitable. But something deep inside me stirred violently, like a long-dormant force awakening. The passion for the piano I had once sealed away was clawing its way back to the surface, breaking through the ice I had locked it beneath. If I just stood by and let this happen, then what about Lily's tears? Hadn't I sworn to do everything I could to make this recital a success? "I'll play." The words slipped from my mouth, cutting through the tense silence. It wasn't something I had consciously decided to say. Before I even realized it, the thought had turned into spoken words. Everyone in the dressing room turned to look at me at once. Their faces all carried the same expression. What the hell is he talking about? Even Tom peeked in from the hallway, furrowing his brows in confusion. "You? Play? What exactly?" Tom scoffed, his voice dripping with disbelief. I met his gaze head-on, clenched my fists tightly, and declared, "I'll play the piano part for the second act. Of course, I won't be as perfect as Jake. But it's better than doing nothing and letting this end in failure." Lily stood there, mouth slightly open, trying to say something, but no words came out. The manager and the concertmaster also stared at me, wide-eyed. It was only natural. I was nothing more than an operations staff member. Suddenly claiming I could take over for Jake was beyond reckless. "Ha! Don't be ridiculous, Nathan. You're practically a nobody. Where the hell did you even learn to play?" Tom let out an exasperated laugh. On the surface, he was right. But I turned to face the concertmaster directly, my expression serious. "I already have a broad grasp of the sheet music. Jake played some of these pieces in the first act, and I memorized them by ear during rehearsals. If we go over the improvisational sections and how to sync with the orchestra, I can do it." At first, the concertmaster seemed skeptical. But as I quickly laid out the musical structure, how the solo parts entered, and the nuances of coordinating with the conductor, his expression gradually began to change. "How do you know all this? And you even understand the orchestra's adjustment points?" The musicians in the dressing room began murmuring, some whispering, "No way," as they stared at me intently. I didn't need to reveal everything about my past here. But right now, the only thing that mattered was using every bit of knowledge and experience I had to salvage this moment. "Please. Time is running out. If you give me the sheet music, I can go over it quickly. As long as we can align on the key points, I can play this performance." Every second counted. By now, the audience was likely returning to their seats, waiting for the second act to begin. I had taken a gamble by speaking up, but whether or not the concertmaster would approve, that was the real question. I waited, silently praying. Finally, the concertmaster glanced at Lily before locking eyes with me. With a resolute expression, he spoke. "All right. Honestly, this is insane. But we don't have another option. We, as an orchestra, don't want this to end here either. Thank you." I immediately bowed deeply. Just then, the manager burst out, wait a damn second. We can't just hand this over to some amateur. What if he messes up? What if he ruins Jake's comeback concert?" He was absolutely justified in his concern. But before anyone else could respond, Jake himself, still grimacing in pain, spoke. "If I force myself to play now, I might never be able to perform again. Please, trust him." Jake bit his lip, enduring the pain, and the room fell silent as everyone held their breath. "Nathan." Lily's voice trembled as she looked straight into my eyes. "Can you really play this? A program even professional pianists struggle with." Her gaze was filled with both uncertainty and hope. I gave only one answer, spoke like a vow, "I can. I told you that night I would support you no matter what. But this time, I want to physically hold up this stage myself." Blackout. A murmur spread through the audience. Small voices whispered, wondering what was going on. The conductor stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, ready to explain the situation. But in that moment, I made my decision. I took a step forward, right into the center of the stage. All the lights turned to me at once. A murmur rippled through the audience. No one had expected an unknown staff member to suddenly appear on stage. Feeling my heart pounding in my chest, I took my seat at the grand piano. The black and white keys, which should have been familiar, now felt like a daunting, monstrous presence. And yet, at the same time, there was something comforting about them. The conductor turned to me, gave a small nod, then slowly raised his baton. The orchestra's introduction began softly. I steadied my breathing and placed my fingers on the keys, playing the first note with careful precision. The melody began to flow, smoother than I had even expected. Complex passages, intricate harmonies with the orchestra, all of it seemed to align naturally, as if my body still remembered every detail. The conductor, the concertmaster, and the musicians, though initially uncertain, quickly adjusted to my pace. Gasps of surprise rose from the audience, but I barely registered them. And then, the piece shifted into an abrupt moment of silence, a section where the solo stood out. At that moment, the concertmaster glanced at me and gave a slight nod, as if to say, "Go on. You've got this." I took a breath and poured everything into the keys. Delicate trills, nuanced ritardandos, a glissando that surged like a wave of emotion. Then, from the back of the stage, I heard the concertmaster's startled voice. It was just a whisper, but I caught every word. Could it be? The Nathan Spielman technique. That was the name some in the music world had once used to describe my unique playing style. Back when I was known as the young prodigy, Nathan, dominating competitions one after another. My distinct touch had briefly become a hot topic in the classical community. But one day, that fame shattered, scattering into nothingness. And from that moment on, I had sealed the piano away, vowing never to touch it again. The final chord resonated through the hall. Scattered applause began to ripple through the audience, then, in an instant, it erupted into a thunderous standing ovation. It was an unbelievable sight. Frozen in place, I sat with my hands still resting on the keys, feeling as if I were trapped in a dream. I can still play. That simple realization sent a surge of warmth through my chest, and my vision blurred with unshed tears. When I looked up, I saw Lily at the back of the audience, eyes glistening, clapping softly. Her expression held a mix of astonishment, relief, and joy. I felt the heat of the stage lights on my back, the gazes of my fellow musicians in the orchestra, the staff who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Even Tom stood frozen, his face a mask of shock. The concertmaster gently closed his sheet music, then turned to me. "So you are the Nathan I've heard about." As the applause and cheers filled the grand hall, rising to the rafters, I lowered my head deeply. This might just be a new beginning. That thought filled me as I closed my eyes. The miraculous second act had come to an end, but I remained in a corner of the dressing room, feeling utterly drained. Even from here, I could hear the murmurs of astonishment outside. Who is that guy? Could he really have been a former pianist? Why would someone with that kind of skill be working as hotel staff? Even the orchestra members kept stealing glances my way, whispering among themselves. But before the murmurs could settle, the heavy dressing room door suddenly swung open with force. A man stepped in, exuding the presence of a high-ranking executive, his sharp eyes carrying an unmistakable coldness. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was Alexander, the event's top sponsor. Well, everyone. That was quite the performance. Or rather, thanks to all the spectacular chaos, the publicity is more than covered. He wore a faint smile, but his voice carried the biting chill of a winter wind. The hotel executives hurriedly bowed their heads, but none dared to meet Alexander's piercing gaze. It was our company that funded this grand comeback concert. Without us, La Classica wouldn't have been able to promote the event on such a large scale, correct? As he spoke, he casually picked up a document from the podium, flipping through the pages as if inspecting them. His posture made it clear this was a blatant display of power. At that moment, Lily stepped into the dressing room, having just finished handling post-concert formalities in the hall. The tension in her face was unmistakable. And yet, it seems an unexpected performer took the stage tonight. A substitute for Jake, was it? Ah. His gaze locked onto me, sharp and unrelenting. I never thought I'd see Nathan still clinging to the world of piano. The room filled with hushed murmurs. Alexander deliberately raised his voice. "Hey, everyone. His name is Nathan, you might have heard of him." For a while, his name was all over national and international competitions. A young prodigy who showed incredible talent, only to suddenly get caught up in a mysterious scandal and be blacklisted from the industry. Yes. I had once been on the verge of making history as a young pianist. I had won multiple prestigious competitions, been invited to renowned European music festivals, and was hailed by the media as a prodigy pianist. In fact, my technique, known as the Spielmann method, had drawn particular attention. The media at the time had coined the name on their own, describing my touch as expressive. Almost like spoken words, no matter how many times I played the same phrase, no two notes ever sounded the same. By constantly adjusting my finger angles and shifting my balance ever so slightly, I created a sound so vivid and unique that it was impossible to forget once heard. One critic even proclaimed it a revolutionary technique that would be remembered for generations. Looking back now, it was a dangerously intoxicating kind of frenzy. I had grown accustomed to being called a genius, to receiving standing ovations. Each round of applause convinced me that I could reach even greater heights. And so, I kept playing concert after concert, recording after recording, until one day I lost everything in a single night. Would you all like to know what exactly he did? Alexander's voice slithered through the room. The staff fell silent, their eyes shifting toward me. This guy was on the verge of making a name for himself across Asia and Europe. They called him a genius, a revolutionary. But behind the scenes, rumors started swirling, claims that he was involved in sponsorship, bribery, and illegal performances, accepting dirty money under the table. Then, the so-called evidence surfaced: photographs. That was all it took. The industry's biggest sponsors pulled out overnight. The media went on a feeding frenzy, and the public took the rumors as fact. And the result? Well, you can see for yourselves. He became known as the disgraced pianist. A few gasps filled the room. The truth was, I had never been able to deny the rumors surrounding me. After all, I had been accused of things I had no memory of, dragged through relentless criticism until I was completely worn down. I didn't even have the strength to fight back. The world didn't care about the truth, it only wanted the spectacle of a scandal. And so, I disappeared from the stage. The Spielman method, once praised as a groundbreaking technique, was silenced in a single night. This can't be real. Some of the staff members murmured in disbelief. Lily, her voice filled with concern, protested, "Those rumors are nothing but baseless lies." But before she could say more, Alexander cut in. His tone dismissive. "Well, whether they're lies or not is beside the point. The fact remains, he has a tainted past. And his very presence here would tarnish the reputation of this hotel. Don't you agree?" Then, with chilling nonchalance, he delivered his final blow. "As far as I'm concerned, a hotel that allows a man with such a past to take the stage is not one I wish to be associated with. Therefore, our sponsorship ends here." The moment he spoke those words, the air in the room turned ice cold. The hotel executives scrambled in a panic, while Lily let out a desperate cry. "No. This can't happen. We need this sponsorship." If the deal was severed now, not only would the hotel's recital program collapse, but every other cultural initiative would be at risk of complete shutdown. The audience outside was still basking in the excitement of a triumphant concert, unaware that behind the scenes, the worst possible outcome was unfolding. I suppose I could offer a single concession." Alexander turned his gaze toward me, a look of feigned sympathy in his cold, calculating eyes. "Nathan may remain at this hotel. That much, I'll allow. However, from this moment on, he is never to touch a piano again. Not here, not anywhere. A public performance? Completely out of the question. If he agrees to stay in the shadows, as a backstage staff member, I'm willing to let this incident slide." His ruthless words made me clench my jaw in frustration. The surrounding staff wore grim expressions, while Lily's voice trembled with outrage. "This is insane." "Insane?" Alexander let out a cold laugh. "I suggest you choose your words carefully, young lady." His icy gaze locked onto Lily, sharp and unforgiving. "Aren't you in a precarious position yourself? If I pull out of the sponsorship deal, the hotel's cultural program won't just shrink, it might be shut down entirely. And if that happens, what do you think will become of your position as the coordinator? It's not hard to imagine, is it?" Lily opened her mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. She had fought so hard to secure sponsorships, to keep these recitals alive. If they cut the contract here, there's a real chance she could lose her job. Let me warn you, do you really have the luxury of taking the risk of making an enemy out of me? Think carefully about your situation. The weight of the surrounding stares was suffocating. Even Lily looked at me with teary eyes, whispering, "This is just too cruel." But more than anything, I didn't want to cause her or anyone else any more trouble. I couldn't let the hotel's cultural programs be destroyed. I couldn't let Lily's dreams and all her hard work be trampled on. Taking a slow, quiet breath, I finally spoke. I understand. Lily gasped, her voice breaking. Nathan. The hotel executives let out a sigh of relief, but their expressions only made the moment feel even more painful. I will never play the piano again. I'll stay behind the scenes, out of sight. So please, protect this hotel. Protect her work. As soon as I said it, Alexander smirked, shrugging his shoulders. As if to say, you should have just agreed from the start. And then, a voice suddenly rang out from the far end of the hallway. Is that really what you want, Nathan? The voice belonged to someone who shouldn't have even been able to stand. It was Jake. His arm was still wrapped in a support brace, and with the help of his manager and the concertmaster, he slowly made his way toward us. His complexion was still pale, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. Are you really going to give up the piano again? Just like last time, without saying a word, without fighting back? His question hit me like a sharp blow, and I instinctively averted my gaze. Back then, when the scandal erupted, I hadn't even tried to fight back, I had simply run away. And in the end, I knew, even if only faintly, that by doing so, I had thrown away my only chance to clear my name. Nathan, do you remember? Back when we trained together in the master class? Yes, I remembered. We had both been students in an elite piano workshop, learning from one of the world's most renowned pianists. Day and night. We had devoted ourselves to the keyboard, striving for perfection. We had been rivals, constantly pushing each other to improve. At first, I'll be honest, I was jealous. No matter how difficult the piece, your fingers danced across the keys effortlessly, creating a sound no one else could ever imitate. That time we spent together, it was priceless to me. I always wanted to catch up to you, to surpass you. And now, I can finally say it, the only reason I'm still playing piano today is because I had the chance to learn beside you. His voice carried the weight of nostalgia, filled with both admiration and longing. Back then, we were rivals, both reaching for the highest peak. You stood at the pinnacle, shining brighter than anyone else, and I chased after you. That was the most thrilling time of my life. But just as the air grew thick with memories, a sharp voice sliced through it. Jake, what the hell are you saying? A tense silence followed. Have you forgotten his disgraceful past? A man like him has no right to speak of music ever again. Jake lifted his head, his expression shifting into something darker as he turned toward the voice. Are you serious, Alexander? What? I exchanged glances with the staff around me, all of us frozen in shock. Wait. You both have the same last name, but could it be? No one had realized it until now. Jake and this man were brothers. You really thought I didn't know anything? That so-called tainted past of his, most of it was fabricated, wasn't it? I know everything. I know that it was all orchestrated behind the scenes, by you, Alexander. In an instant, the air grew tense. Alexander's voice rose sharply. Don't be ridiculous. But Jake didn't flinch at all. You were a genius at everything since we were kids. You received elite education to become a businessman, and you had a natural talent for it. But the one thing you didn't have was musical talent. That's why I thought you supported me so passionately, because I had what you lacked. But I was wrong, wasn't I? Jake furrowed his brows, his expression pained. Every time a real rival appeared, strange rumors started circulating, sponsors suddenly withdrew, and somehow, I always ended up winning. As a kid, I never noticed it, but as I grew older, I finally understood. It was you, Alexander. You were the one working in the shadows. Alexander was speechless. The surrounding staff members held their breath, watching the exchange unfold. And yet, you always told me, you are my pride. Every time I won, it was treated like an achievement for you, as if my success was your own. But it was all fake, wasn't it? Jake's voice trembled with frustration. The one who never truly believed in me was you. You thought from the very start that I couldn't win on my own, didn't you? That's why you didn't hesitate to eliminate my rivals. But what's the point of winning like that? What does that even mean? Despite the pain in his right arm, Jake kept his voice strong. He was my benefactor, you know. Back when we were both studying in the master class together. I was struggling, unable to get results in competitions, and my constant practice felt fruitless. One night, I muttered to myself, maybe I should just quit and close the piano lid. That's when I heard a soft knock on the door. And when I turned around, it was Nathan. Don't say stuff like that. He told me. Nobody gets to decide your limits but you. Come on, let's push forward a little longer, together. At first, I wanted to argue. I mean, he was a natural, a genius, what did he know about struggling? What right did he have to say that to me? But then he continued. You can't just draw the line for yourself like that. And if you really feel like you're at your breaking point, then I'll be here every day to support you. Training, practice, whatever it takes, we'll get through it. And as he laughed and patted my shoulder, something inside me softened. The ice that had been weighing on my chest melted just a little. And in that moment, I thought, maybe I can try just a little longer. Hearing those words, my chest tightened. I never knew Jake felt that way back then. The truth is, the reason I stepped away from the piano world for a while was because of my hand. My right hand, maybe a tendon, maybe a muscle. The doctor told me I needed complete rest and rehab. And honestly, I thought it was the perfect excuse. Without Nathan around, the piano world felt empty to me. The person I admired most was gone, and I didn't know what I was playing for anymore. But then, I got an offer. A passionate one. Jake turned to look at Lily. At first, I was skeptical. I thought she just wanted to stir up excitement with a comeback of the star. But she was so persistent. And then, I remembered what Nathan once told me. Nobody gets to decide your limits but you. When I was at my lowest, when I wanted to quit, he told me to keep going. He patted my shoulder and gave me hope. I realized that he never wanted me to give up. And so, I decided to come. And when I arrived at the hotel, I saw you, Nathan, working behind the scenes. Honestly, it shocked me. That's why I acted so harshly toward you. Jake turned to face me directly and bowed his head. I'm sorry. But thanks to you, the performance was incredible. And now, it's my turn to protect you. Alexander, please, I'm begging you. Stop this. As Jake choked out those words, Alexander, who had been speaking so forcefully just moments ago, suddenly fell silent. Then, in a low voice, almost spitting the words out, he said, So, you knew. At first, I didn't. But when coincidences pile up like that, it becomes obvious. I only did it so you wouldn't have to struggle. Alexander's words sounded as if he were convincing himself. Do you have any idea how much it meant to me when you were little and called me a genius at everything? His voice trembled slightly. Everyone around me expected me to be perfect. There was no room for failure. But you were the only one who made me feel at ease. You genuinely believed in me. Do you know how much those words saved me? He placed a hand on his forehead, lost in thought. That's why I wanted to do everything for you. I thought I was making things easier for you, helping you win, making sure you didn't have to struggle. I convinced myself that it was for your sake. But in the end, I was only feeding my own pride. I didn't protect you, I cornered you. With his gaze lowered, Alexander bit his lip. His figure looked lonely, as if he were blaming himself for trying so desperately to protect his brother and failing. You probably don't want to hear this, but if there's anything I can do to make things right, I want to try. Not by getting in your way, but by truly supporting you. I'm sorry. I know it's too late, but can I still be your brother? Can I stand by your side this time, for real? After finishing his words, Alexander fell silent, waiting for Jake's response, his expression a mix of fear and determination. Jake's eyes glistened as he slowly nodded. Alexander, thank you. If you truly mean that, then I want to trust you again. The sharp tension between them softened just a little. Then, Alexander turned to me and bowed deeply. Nathan, I have caused you more trouble than words can ever atone for. You should have been standing on stage, shining in the spotlight. But because of my narrow-mindedness, my pathetic jealousy, I stole music from you. His voice, now lowered, no longer carried the intimidating presence from before. When he lifted his gaze, I saw the unmistakable weight of regret in his eyes. I thought that with enough influence and power, I could shape reality to my will. I never stopped to consider the cost, the sacrifices others were forced to make. I know I can't make amends so easily, but at the very least, I swear this, I will never let you be cornered like that again. I want to support not just my brother, but your music as well. Not as a manipulator from behind the scenes, but as a true supporter. Please, will you let me? For a moment, silence enveloped us. I won't run away anymore. If you truly want to support music, Alexander, then I want to believe in you. I want to help Jake create a stage where music thrives. Let's do it together. Tears welled in Jake's eyes. Tom, Lily, and the staff all shared looks of relief, their tense expressions finally easing. What once felt like an unresolvable clash had found a resolution, a new future taking shape. Thank you, truly, thank you. Alexander bowed deeply once more, expressing his gratitude to everyone in the room. A few days later, Alexander held a formal press conference to reveal the full truth. At a public apology conference attended by hotel executives, music industry professionals, and members of the media, Alexander openly confessed to his past wrongdoings. As he bowed deeply in apology, there was not a trace of his former arrogance. With a pained expression, as if he were rejecting everything he once was, his voice trembled as he said, "I will accept any criticism." In that moment, I knew he had truly repented from the depths of his heart. Afterward, he underwent legal investigations and proceedings conducted by experts, facing the penalties for his fraudulent actions and involvement in various schemes. Fines, loss of credibility, his punishment was far from insignificant. Yet, instead of resisting, he embraced it, as if grateful for the chance to start anew. Even now, he continues to support Jake and me from the shadows. Not by attaching his name to prestigious venues or sponsorships, but in quiet ways, donating equipment to local music schools, covering operational costs for concerts. He never steps into the spotlight, only watching over us from behind the scenes. Perhaps this is his way of making amends. And, coincidentally, just a week after the press conference, I officially signed a contract with Hotel La Classica as their resident artist, A New Beginning. The hotel saw an opportunity in the recent controversy, branding me as the miraculous comeback pianist, Nathan, to further expand their cultural initiatives. But it wasn't just a publicity stunt. I could see it in Lily's eyes, they genuinely valued my music. What moved me the most was how the entire operations staff congratulated me, saying, "Congratulations, and do your best." Even Tom, who used to do nothing but throw sarcastic remarks at me, was now completely acting like a fan, exclaiming, "That performance gave me chills, and if you ever release a CD, I'm definitely buying it." He was still as blunt as ever, but when he excitedly said, "Make sure you sign it. I'm keeping it as a family heirloom." His enthusiasm was genuinely endearing. Meanwhile, Jake received some devastating news. His relentless playing had taken its toll. The doctor warned that if he didn't undergo surgery soon and take time to recover, he might never be able to play the piano again. When I heard this backstage, Jake had his head down, frustration written all over his face. But despite everything, he looked forward. I've decided to go through with the surgery. I need to heal properly. Watching you fight your way back onto the stage, Nathan, it reminded me not to give up. His determination was unwavering. If he kept pushing through the pain, sooner or later, he would reach his limit. That's why he made the decision to step away from the stage for a while. I had no intention of stopping him. If anything, I clenched my fist and thought, now it's my turn to push him forward. When I come back, will you play with me again? He asked, his eyes bright with a childlike hope. I smiled and nodded. Of course. Let's create the best stage together again. I'll be waiting, so you'd better come back. As we shook hands firmly, Lily and the other staff members watched with warm smiles. This time, I wouldn't run. And Jake wouldn't give up. We would each move forward, dreaming of the day we could share the stage once more. Shortly after making that promise, I finished another recital and stepped off the stage. The exhaustion and satisfaction from the performance washed over me as I wiped the sweat from my forehead. Waiting for me backstage was Lily. She stood in her sleek suit, her hair neatly tied back, her cheeks slightly flushed as she smiled at me. You were incredible. I can't even put into words how moved I was. Hearing that, I felt my face heat up. Alone together in the narrow backstage hallway. The distant footsteps of staff members faded, and suddenly, my heartbeat seemed unbearably loud. Thanks. Honestly, I still feel like my hands are shaking up there. Really? It didn't look that way at all, she said with a soft laugh. And, just like that, I found myself laughing along with her. No matter what challenges lie ahead, I knew I wouldn't run anymore. With her by my side, I would keep moving toward the next stage. That certainty filled my chest. Hey, you're free tonight, right? I came up with a new project. I want more people to experience your music. Still holding my hand, she flashed a playful, mischievous smile. I simply nodded and tightened my grip on her fingers. Of course. The sheet music of life is still filled with countless unwritten possibilities. With key changes, breaks, and even unexpected rests, everyone is composing their own unique melody. No matter how many walls I hit or how close I come to despair, I will never close the piano lid again. Believing in the bonds I've formed and in the power of music, I will let new melodies resonate from these keys, over and over again. That, I swore to myself.